it's one thing to agree, hey, follow me at a major, and it's another thing to show up when you're in contention on Sunday and we're knocking at the door of your house saying, hey, you said we can come over, can we film? Would you mind putting this mic on? And I give so much credit to the players who got it and understood what we were trying to do and were willing to let us in. And I think they're going to love it. I think they're going to be really excited about, my what I told them from the very beginning was like, my goal is for you to watch this with your friends and your family and look at them and see like, that's what it was like. That's what it was like to be me last year.
Well, it's Chad Mumm joining us here on the In the Golfers Journal podcast. Chad, thanks so much for joining us and taking the time to talk a little bit about, everyone's excited about Full Swing on Netflix. Welcome to the pod.
I am so pumped to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, you have a long and distinguished resume, but right at the top for us goes Broken Tea Society member, and we saw right on the desk in front of you a gorgeous, I think number 21, looking right back at you.
That's right. Stacked on a couple other editions as well. And I've been in the Discord, so I kind of more of a lurker, but I'm in there. I'm in there.
I like it. Well, let's cut to the chase. What role does the Golfers Journal play in this Netflix docuseries?
There's like maybe 3 or 4 episodes that center around the Golfers Journal. You'd be shocked at how much it features in the series.
That's what I thought. Live be damned. Let's talk about the magazine that's changing golf media.
Biggest story in golf.
No, thank you. No, this is really exciting because, a lot of people are talking about the show. And what I wanted to talk about with you is, from our perspective at the Golfers Journal as folks who tell golf stories full time, and sometimes those stories are sort of unwieldy and have a lot of pieces to them. I was sort of thinking from a creative point of view, how do you craft a story out of so much stuff that happened last year? Where do you even, as a writer, producer, director, where do you even start?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you exactly where we started, which was at the beginning of the season. We sat down with all the cast members, or it's weird to say cast members actually in the context of like,
it's like, wait,
athletes.
What?
It's like,
golfers.
but the golfers, we sat down with each player who had signed up for the show and had sort of opted in. And we started out with an audio interview with them, and kind of like we're doing here, it's just a conversation. And, one thing that we've learned, and our partners on this project at Box to Box, who make Drive to Survive and Breakpoint and a bunch of other great shows, they've learned with pro athletes in general, you kind of put a camera in their face, they tend to till they get comfortable, they tend to go into the media training mode. That's what they're used to. There's cameras in their faces all the time. But if you sit down, put a lav on them and just sit in a room together and have a conversation, there's no cameras, there's no makeup, there's no lights, it's just a conversation that they tend to open up, they tend to give you a little bit more. So we started the first anything that we made on this show was we went down to the Hero World Challenge in the Bahamas in 2021. So I guess it was November 21. And there happens to be a recording studio there at Albany where they play that tournament. And it's like Drake's made an album there. Apparently it's part owned by Justin Timberlake, we were told. But anyway, it was like an amazing sort of first impression for all the golfers, because it's like, hey, come over to this cool recording studio and sit down and we're just going to talk about your life. So, that's how we started. And you just it began a conversation. We used those interviews to kind of build the spine of a story of what we thought might, unfold over the season. And one of the things that was true about this series is the goal. We really wanted to show people what it was like to compete in pro golf. It wasn't, we weren't really there to tell a story about a major or an individual tournament. The whole thing was meant to be filtered through the lens of what it's like from the player's perspective. And I remember having a conversation with one of the majors, and they're asking us what we were shooting, and I said, look, you can make 5 documentaries about your major, the history, the all of the great stuff that's happened there, the traditions, everything. But what we're doing there is to tell the story of what it's like to compete in that event. We're going to show up and we're going to see it through the player's eyes. And that's going to bring us into places where cameras have never been before. And the focus is not going to be on the event. It's going to be on what it's like to be a competitor in it, and what it feels like to be the wife or the best friend or the caddy or the coach or the friend of the person who's competing. So those first interviews were really, designed to give us a sense of who these people were, who these, players were, what was important to them, what kept them up at night, what they were looking to do this year. And, you start, they give you the goals. Oh, I'm going to win a major. I'm going to get to number one in the world. And then, pretty soon you get a little bit deeper and you start to understand what their lives are like, what relationships are important, what means the most to them, do they want to get out of it? And from there, we sort of wrote like high level story arcs that we thought we would want to follow, because we were everywhere last year. I think we shot close to 300 shoot days, which was not, consecutively,
Wow.
but with our various crews all over. I mean, it was a lot of shooting. But we couldn't be everywhere all at once. And so we had to sort of pick our spots. And so those initial audio interviews really guided our shape of like, okay, we really think we should be with Justin Thomas at the PGA, for example. Turned out to
Mhm.
be a good call. Matt Fitzpatrick going back to Brookline, maybe a good idea to follow him that week.
Yeah.
So we started to shape it out. And then as the season progressed, the storylines, like some players, became more central, and the players that really leaned in early gave us a ton of access to their families, to their homes, to their lives, to their private jets, everything in between. And you started to see the arc that happened over the course of an entire season. And then obviously, the live stuff happened. So that kind of introduced a bit of a pivot point. But even for like the players that you see that live story sort of told through, it's like, it fits with their character arc. When we first sat down with, a guy like Ian Poulter, it's like what was important to him really still comes through, even though, his storyline was impacted hugely by the, Liv's emergence and his decision to go there.
Yeah.
And then obviously it's editing. We started cutting this thing like after the Masters. The first edit team started. So it's been in post production,
Wow.
in kind of an ongoing way. And then we were like, we would add stuff and then but I would say, like, for the most part, a lot of pre-planning and then a lot of flexibility to kind of follow the story as it panned out.
That's amazing. 300 shoot days, and you're turning that into how many episodes? I mean, how many hours on
Yeah, it's like
Netflix?
eight episodes of, like,
Whoa,
roughly an hour, yeah, each. So yeah, it's a lot.
man. So the process of condensing that, God bless your editors. I can't even imagine how much is left.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that is that frustrating? Is that we have to do season 2 behind the scenes? I mean, what do you do with all the other good stuff?
I think there's a lot of stuff that could be used in future seasons for sure.
Mhm.
Some more evergreen stuff off the course, but for the most part, all the important scenes, are in the show. That there's a
Oh,
lot of we shot a lot of practice rounds that just nothing happened. Like some good caddy banter maybe, but like
right.
nothing meaningful. And what you see in crafting a show like this, and what you'll see when you watch it on Netflix, is like so much of the off the course stuff is really where the narrative is driven. Like, you get inside these players' heads, you understand sort of what it feels like to be in their shoes. And then the tournaments and the competition is like the payoff to those character stories. It's payoff to those arcs. So, we don't need to be at a tournament for, 5 days, including a practice round, and every single round walking you through what happened on Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. In some cases, we just drop you right in to the back nine on Sunday, or Saturday afternoon, or Sunday morning, getting ready to be in the final group. And I always wondered, what do you do if you're sitting on the lead in a major? Like, what do you do all morning on Sunday, like in the final group? Well, I got to see that up close. Turns out you do what we all do. You watch the golf tournament and you try not to think about it. You
Huh.
hang out with your family. But
That's incredible. That's cool. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Now, as you're putting the episodes together, do you work off God, are you working off storyboards? Do you have a script? Is it an outline? I'm just curious as a writer, like what the hell
mhm.
I would do if someone said, create this, take a year of golf and turn it into 8 hours.
Yeah, well, we had a friend, like I said, we from those initial interviews, we kind of had a skeleton of where we thought the story arcs would go, and then a little bit of like hanging stuff on that as the season went. And you could start to see where there were holes in stories, like, okay, we've got this arc, but we're missing like the home connection here, or
Okay.
this player thanks somebody in a after a win, and let's go find that person and live with them a bit, and build out some of those relationships. And so it is like any editing process. You start with a lot. You kind of have an idea about the skeleton of each storyline and the kind of macro storyline. And then, you kind of let real life take you where you need to go. And we're very lucky on this show to have a lot of resources. We had a really talented and amazing team of post production people, including like story editors and assistant editors, and I mean, just the archive alone, I wish I had the number in front of you, but it's like trillions of like, it's like terabytes and petabytes of footage because we had all the stuff that we
Right.
shot, but also like almost every single shot that was hit and captured on a broadcast camera, we had access to, and we're pulling sources from like everywhere from, like I said, audio mics on the golf course that are typically only used to hear the sound of a strike. We were able to light those up and listen in actually to the conversations both before the broadcast got to that scene and then afterwards, and it was a technical feat to be able to like tap into all that stuff, and it took a lot of collaboration on the part of the PGA Tour for one, but also like all their broadcast partners and the majors broadcast partners to kind of give us access to that stuff so we could capture the golf even if we weren't physically there like at that moment, and be able to tell those stories and come back and see it in a different way. But yeah, I mean, it's like any project, it looks daunting at the beginning, and then you get into it and you start chipping away at it, one thing at a time. And we were lucky this year with just so many incredible storylines, and
Yeah.
so many of our players like won majors. People that join the cast. There's only 4 major winners a year, and we got 3 of them in the show. So that's a pretty big accomplishment that we had nothing to do with other than maybe picking correctly, who we were following on those days. And but it's yeah, I mean, just a testament to the team that we have that works on this show, that's been working on the show, and the many thousands of hours they've put into like making it great and making it
Yeah.
exciting, and hopefully giving people a look at golf in a way that they've never seen it before.
Well, that's what it looks like. I mean, so you mentioned access. I think that's really interesting. Getting that access. I mean, that's where the whole story starts, right? Getting
Hmm.
it from the PGA, getting it from the majors, getting it from the players. Which of those was the most challenging to get that sort of access that you needed?
So the PGA Tour sort of took the longest, only because I've been working on this project and sort of pitching it to them for like half a decade now. So
Yeah.
but in fairness to them, I would every year I would see them at CES. I run a Vox Media Studios, which is a big independent film and TV studio, and I'd gotten to know the PGA Tour media team, Chris Wandell, Rick Anderson, Norg Gambutsa. Those are the sort of my 3 main point connections at PGA Tour. I got to know them, back in maybe early 2010s, 2010, 2011. And so every year I'd see them at CES, we'd play golf. They were very gracious in inviting me out. And then I would pitch them on doing like a hard knocks for golf. And then it was always like, I don't know, timing, maybe not yet, not yet. And then Jay Monahan became commissioner, and I saw them maybe like a month later at CES in 2019. We went and played Shadow Creek, and my first time ever being out there. And I brought it back up on the range and said, I think now's the time. And they were like, yeah, no, it is the time. And by the end of the round, we had sort of hashed out what it could look like. And then by a couple months later at the Players Championship, I was in the room finishing that deal. And then I was at the Masters without a pass for the clubhouse, just standing outside the tree with everybody else and flagging down agents when I saw them, and introducing this idea to them and saying, hey, we're doing this. We'd really love for you to be a part of it. So, the tour was, once, Jay had sort of given it the green light internally, they've been amazing, sort of rolling out the access for us, and really, leaning into this project, sort of understanding what it could do for golf, and not just for the PGA Tour, but for golf in general. Um, After Netflix got involved, and during COVID, all of the majors and the PGA Tour had to kind of work together to remake the golf schedule. So that had sort of created an environment where they were talking to each other in a way they hadn't really talked, before. And this project and Drive to Survive was really blowing up. So this project became something that I think they all saw the opportunity for. And once Augusta came on board, all the other majors came on board. We had something really special. And then it was a matter of like getting the players. The first 3 players to sign up were Ricky Fowler was the first player just to say yes, and then we got Tony Finau and Cameron Champ and Justin Thomas for sort of the core 4 original players. And then once we, in late 2020, we started really building out the cast and getting to sort of what you'll see when the show comes out. And then we even added players during the season. Like Rory wasn't initially committed to the show, and he came in at the end of the summer, and was incredible. It gave us incredible access, and just the testament to how awesome a guy Rory is, to just really lean in. So yeah, I think it's like anything, it's every step of the way was like, you're just pitching constantly, or, even showing up. Like, it's one thing to agree, hey, follow me at a major. And it's another thing to show up when you're in contention on Sunday and we're knocking at the door of your house saying, hey, you said we could come over. Can we film? would you mind putting this mic on? And I give so much credit to the players who got it and understood what we were trying to do and were willing to let us in, and I think they're going to love it. I think they're going to be really excited about, my what I told them from the very beginning was like, my goal is for you to watch this with your friends and your family and look at them and see like, that's what it was like. That's what it was like to be me last year.
That's awesome. Well, that is extraordinary access. Were there lines drawn? What were the rules? Or was it just, hey, 24/7, I'm available? I mean, I'm sure there had to be some sort of, maybe there wasn't. Were there lines that you couldn't cross or lines that you had to work to cross?
Our biggest goal was to not produce any scenes. Like we didn't want to, this is not the Kardashians, we're not making a reality show. So we're not creating conflict for conflict's sakes. We're not in there like producing scenes. So what we told all the players was like, look, if it's important to you, it's going to be important to us. So if you're doing something, let us come and film. Like you don't have to make time in your schedule for us. We're gonna just ride along with whatever you're already doing. And that was, I think, a surprise to them. All these players are so scheduled and they've got managers and agents and people around them and commitments to, corporate partners and, pro-ams and all that stuff. And so initially the response was like, oh, this is maybe like another thing I have to think about. And in reality, what we really did with them was like, hey, if you're doing it, like just let us ride along. We're not going to add anything to your calendar outside of a few interviews, to tape to kind of give context to the series, but we're going to be there for you or alongside what you're already doing. And I think like, some of the players had, didn't want like their families deeply covered. Other players were like inviting us into their house with their spouses and, it sort of varied. But we were able to get access in a way that I think we could not have asked for better access or more access than we had in season one. It was, I think, really give a lot of credit to the success of Drive to Survive for kind of introducing this idea. And a lot of the players were fans of that show, so they kind of knew what they were signing up for. But they still got to open the door and let us in. And I think the guys that really lean in are the ones that are going to get the most out of it.
Who is getting the most out of it? Who was giving you the most access and was the most into it?
I mean, everybody who's featured in the show, I think, everybody you saw in the teaser, those are all players that really got it and really leaned in, and I think Rory coming in at the end really was amazing, just coming in kind of late in the game, but really just giving us a ton of amazing access, just was amazing. Players like Joel Damon, Tony Finau, Justin Thomas, Matt Fitzpatrick, Brooks Koepka, Poulter, like they all leaned in a big way. It was really, really cool to see. I hope they all get something out of it.
Why do you think Rory decided eventually to do it? I mean, he had a lot on his plate last year. Do you think he felt like he needed to, with the sort of role that whether he's chosen it or it's been thrust upon him, this role that he has, do you think he felt obligated to be a voice, or was he countering another voice? Why do you think he eventually became part of it?
I think Rory he's just got so much charisma and he's such a natural leader. I think like even pre him committing, we would be in the locker room at like the US Open, for example, and or in the player dining area, we'd be shooting with Joel Damon or Matt Fitzpatrick or Colin Morikawa or one of the guys in our show. And he would just come up to the table with the cameras right there and the boom mic overhead and sit down and start having a conversation. Like he wasn't ever shying away from it. And in some cases, like we were joking, like kept popping up in the background, like leading in,
Right.
we're like, we love it. And so finally we just said, Roy, just get in here. Like, what are you waiting on? Just come on. And he, obviously has a lot to say. And to him, I mean, you'd have to ask him that question about sort of why he said yes. But, he really like has been amazing to work with. And, like once he decided that he was in, he was all in. And that, that's true for like all the players that committed. But in particular, adding him was a lot of fun because he just, he's just not afraid to speak his mind and not in like a filtered way either, just the truly kind of uncensored, unfiltered, like what he really thinks, which has been really cool.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Talking about, all access and putting that together with the word Augusta don't typically go together. And so how was that experience? What was that like? How did you get them on board? And could you truly go go anywhere from someone who's had a credential there, and there's still places very much where you can and can't go. So I'm just curious how that felt.
I mean, they have been nothing but incredibly gracious and incredibly nice to us, and it
Good.
was still the most terrifying week of my entire life.
Yeah, right.
you know, just like going there and being, like in a suit and tie the whole time because I had clubhouse access and was there, to help facilitating players and agents and being around and I just on my own, like for me being such a golf fan my entire life, like Augusta and the Masters has always been such a special place for me. I mean,
Right.
the tradition of watching it, as a kid, like growing up, the first time I went, I think I was like 11 or 12, and went to the Masters for the first time, just setting foot on that property, just like the almost like religious experience I had as a diehard golfer kid, like getting to go and walk around Augusta National. So, then showing up now, like working there was, it was intense. And even though they were great, like nobody, we got treated extremely well while we were there. And they really held true to their word and they let us into places that no one's ever seen before. I mean, certainly I'm sure we didn't get, I'm sure there's places I don't even know about that we weren't allowed to go to, but for the most part, what we needed to tell that story, they were very accommodating. And obviously the facilities and infrastructure there is amazing. And like we had a really
Yeah.
awesome setup and they took care of us. But it was a terrifying week. I was like every foot I was stepping, I was like making sure I wasn't in the wrong spot and our crews and we were looking out for it. But it went great.
It does
Honestly, it
have
was
that effect.
it does.
Um, and in a cool way. Did you see the wine cellar?
There was not really a reason for us to go to the wine
No,
cellar, but
I can't imagine there would be. That was one of my goals last year, and there's not really a reason for me to go either. But
did you get into it?
not on this trip. I've been down there to where they have like the table that's made from the Eisenhower tree, etc.
Oh,
But
cool.
there's some secret vault that
I'm sure.
we have yet to break through
Well,
with a
one
camera.
random Augusta fact that I don't know if people knew because it was news to me and I had never seen this before, but one of the agents pointed it out on the driving range where we were filming during a practice round. But I don't know if you know this, but the professional driving range that they use for the Masters, they don't use that normally. The members, that's only open for the tournament. And if you look at the range, go back and look at a picture of it, there's sort of three kind of like divided by some trees, fairways to hit your driver into if you're, hitting a longer club. And apparently they're like replicas of the three statistically hardest driving holes on the course, which if you
Really?
go back and look at it, you're like, oh my God. And it's like number one, and I forget the other two, but it's like it is. And apparently it's like there's a bunker exactly the same distance from the number one tee on the driving range. And it's just a
No
chance for
way.
the players to get, that visual in their head. And I was like, once someone told me that, you can't unsee it. And that was my favorite little Augusta factoid that we learned that week. And
That is
it's
a great factoid. That is fantastic. Yeah, you can warm up like you've got to carry the bunker on one. I
like,
imagine like 11's probably out there somewhere.
hmm
That's
yeah, go
really
look at it. Go Google an image of it, and you'll be like, oh my God.
that is so cool. So I think what's also great about this is Broken Tea Society member, golfer
hmm
yourself to
hmm
get to do this.
Yeah,
What a dream gig,
dream
right?
come true. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I grew up playing golf. My dad was in the Air Force. I was a military brat, so I'd move around a lot. And I remember, my grandfather was also a fighter pilot who was stationed with the RAF for a period of time up in Lukers Air Force Base, which is like right next to St. Andrews. The
Wow.
officers at the RAF, they would like play in matches against the RNA and the St. Andrews Society and all these things. And it was just
Yeah.
golf was like a big part of my life growing up. My grandfather and my dad. And my grandfather retired from the Air Force as a full colonel. And his first job after the Air Force, he became a starter at a golf course in Las Vegas where he was stationed. And that's just how much golf
Nice.
is in our family. And I started playing when I was 6 years old, and then in high school got really serious. I played football and golf, but then tried out for the golf team when I was a freshman, didn't make it, and then decided I was going to really get serious, and then came back my sophomore year and won the tryouts and became our number one player, and got a taste of
Nice
reality in
one.
some of the larger junior events and learned that like golf wasn't going to be a profession that I would compete in as a player, but it's like all of us who are listening to this podcast and are members of Broken Tea Society. It's like golf's still the thing I think about, all the time. Like I can't imagine a day that's gone by that I haven't thought about golf in some sense. I lived in New York for 8 years and didn't get a chance to play as much, but I'd still be sitting there going to some meeting, in a elevator where there's a mirror, and I'm like, I'm doing the
Yeah,
little
man.
golf swing, like checking my positions with a umbrella or something. It's just,
It's a little
it's
inside there. You want to get up right there, Chad.
yeah,
You know?
exactly. Everybody, it's like you all know, everybody listening knows like how much, golf has just given me so much my whole life. And it's just been such a source of like adventure and challenge and thrilling, friendships and travel and history and, appreciation for design. And so to get a chance to do this and to sort of take the sport and the thing that I love, more than, anything other than like my kids and my family, my wife, it really is a dream come true.
This is going to be a tough one to top as a golf fan. I mean, spending the last couple of years doing this, just awesome. Now, as a fan, were there moments, and maybe it was Augusta. Just give us some of those pinch me moments where, like, okay, you're there as a professional, you're doing your thing, you've got to capture this footage, you have to make sure you get that or get this. But there had to be those moments where you're just like, I can't believe I'm standing here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Augusta was like that. The whole, every minute during that week kind of felt like that. But also, it's like you are working, so there's things to
Mhm.
do. There's always in production. There's always something that's like going wrong, or someone's not where they're supposed to be, and you're trying to figure stuff out. And so, you're so busy that it like never really got that moment. There was a moment at Augusta where I think I want to say it was like Saturday. Was it Saturday where it was really cold and rainy, or was that Friday? It was one of those days. It was freezing cold, but then like the sun came out and it was like sunset. And I remember just like standing up by the first tee, like looking out at the golf course, like as the sun broke through. And it was just like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like here I am. Like this is the childhood dream. I remember watching that tournament as a kid, and to think that like I get to be the person to bring this to life, this kind of thing that no one's ever seen before, was like really kind of hit me in a big way. The kind of relationships that I've built with the players and their families and their agents and their teams has been really fun and really special. I think another pinch me moment was like just honestly like one of the craziest shots I've ever seen in my life. One of the first shoots we did was we went with Justin Thomas to the Titleist Performance Institute, where he was doing some like fitting. I think he was like getting fitted for a new 3-wood or something and doing some wedge work. And he hit like the most insane shot I've ever seen hit in person ever. And it would take me 10 minutes to even describe it, but safe to say he like intentionally bladed a lob wedge underneath the fence and then had it check on a green that was like 20 yards on the other side of the fence. And I still don't know how physically that was possible to do. And he just did it the first try. And that was like a unbelievable thing to see. It didn't make it into the show because there's like no context for it, but
Ah,
he was just
come
showing
on.
off, and it was ridiculous.
Can we
The
get that
other,
footage,
one of the
please?
first time we actually rolled cameras wasn't even at a PGA Tour event. It was with Joel Damon and Harry Higgs and their caddies. They'd come back from Hawaii, the Hawaii swing, and they challenged some locals. They'd never played Goat Hill Park, which is a municipal course in near San
Near and dear to
Diego.
our heart. Yeah, of
Yeah, and
course.
they had just like posted on Twitter like, we want a game, we want to go to Goat Hill, we've heard it's great. So they just challenged two random Twitter people, and they were going to play in a scramble against Joel and his caddy and Harry and his caddy versus these two guys. And it turns out both were like college golfers. They were kind of like ringers, and I don't think they were expecting it. So they get to the first team, both guys just like stripe it down the middle, and they're like,
Right.
oh shit, we're like in for it, but they showed up with like a bunch of White Claws. And by the time, so this is our first experience ever shooting with pro golfers, and we're at Goat Hill Park, Joel Damon and Harry Higgs making fun of each other the entire time. Everyone's wearing mics. These kids are like hanging with the pros, and everybody's laughing. By the time, it's kind of sunset. By the time we get to the back nine, it felt like, I don't know, like the Shell's Wonderful World of Golf. Like a crowd had heard about it, and there was probably 30 or 40 people, little kids, dogs, everybody with a beer in their hand, music playing, like walking, following this group of like these, 6 players playing in the scramble as the sun set in San Diego. I mean, it was just like amazing. We looked at each other after that and we were like, oh my God, we've got a show. Like if this is day one of shooting, like we've
Yeah.
got it,
Because that's awesome. I was gonna ask you, what was the moment when you knew you had, maybe that's when you knew you had a show, or when you knew you had a great show? Because when you create anything, whether it's a video or writing something, there's that anxiety you have going into it where you wonder, I don't know if I can pull this off.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
always there. And then there's that moment of relief where you're like,
Yep.
I got it.
Yeah.
Or I've got something. Was that the moment, or there might have been others as well?
That moment happened multiple times, but that was the first, day of shooting. And we're like, okay, if this is the way we're starting, this
Yeah.
is like, we're onto something. Another huge moment was on the 72nd hole at Brookline, Matt
Mm.
Fitzpatrick in a bunker. And that whole day was so dramatic. Like his families are all wearing mics, his brother Alex, his
Wow.
friend Dan Rappaport, the golf journalist, his parents. We've got a crew with them. We've got a crew with Matt following him, inside the ropes. You're hearing everything. The Boston fans, like you just don't hear this on the broadcast, are just like roasting him, calling him Matty Sketchers, saying go Zalator. I mean, it was brutal, and you hear it in the show, just like how much
Wow.
they were chirping him. And he hits it in the bunker, and we're like, oh my god, everything. And Matt has given us so much access all year, and we were there with him. We followed him at the PGA Championship. He was in the final group. Literally like spent Saturday night with him at his house with Thomas Peters and Dan Rappaport, like hanging out, talking about what it's like to go be in the final group at the PGA. And then he didn't win, and now we're back again, and it's like overcast and just epic. It just felt like epic out there that whole day. Everyone's kind of wearing quarter zips. It was a little cold. It just looked amazing. I'm like looking at the footage through the monitors, and we're like, oh my god, this is going to be epic. And then he hits it in the bunker, and he hits that shot, and it felt like that ball was in the air for like an hour. I mean, it was crazy because nobody, could see it because it was in an overcast, and all of a sudden it lands right on the
Yeah.
green, 15 feet from the hole, and it was like, oh my god, we did it. Like, I mean, I felt like we had won the U.S. Open. We're like, we're
Right.
gonna get the Matt major, and there it was, and then his reaction, and it was so cool. And then his parents and his family, like they were just so emotional, and you could just see the hard work and like how intense that moment was for everyone in his life. And to be there for that, it was like, oh my god, I think that shot is like in many ways, in my opinion, like the high point of the whole show. Just because
Yeah.
everything like led to that, and it was amazing.
That is amazing. Wow. So, I mean, going into this conversation, and even after, having, been sort of following the developments with the show, a lot of us are wondering, who's the show for? Is it
Mm.
for people who don't know anything about golf, and now we'll bring them along into actually maybe caring about golf? Is it for the golf diehards? But from what you're talking about, I'm as a golf diehard myself, I want to see some of that. I want to see some of that stuff on Sunday. Now I know what Fitzpatrick did, but I'm pretty curious to see what his family was talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's for, our goal is to make it for just a bigger audience than just golf. I think like the hope is that we can introduce a lot of new fans to the sport. But
Sure.
I've watched every episode 100 times and seen every iteration of every cut, and I still get teared up watching the show. Various points, I still get excited and like adrenaline rush. Seeing what happened. Like, even though I know what happened, I've seen it a million times. Like, I think there's enough. There's something in it for. There's definitely a ton in it for hardcore golf fans. And then even if the result, like seeing what it took to get there and being behind the scenes. There's also like a lot of funny camaraderie. There's some real drama with the live stuff, and you all of a sudden have all these players who are being extremely outspoken. Not historically what golfers are known for, being like very outspoken.
Right.
And so there's something for. I definitely think there's something for everybody. My hope is that you're a diehard golfer, and maybe your spouse, your friend, or your cousin, or your sister, or your uncle, like they want to watch this show too, even though they've never tuned in to watch golf because they've heard that the stories are interesting, and it is a cool lifestyle to get sort of dropped into. These guys fly around on private jets. They cool friends. They're all athletic and actually cool in real ways. And but even as a golf hardcore fan, like I think I love our episodes. I think it's so fun, and there's something new for everybody, even if you kind of already knew what happened.
Fantastic. Now, as someone who's been through golf improvement and worked hard at your own game, what was your perspective on how hard they work? Do they work harder or not as hard as you thought? It was interesting,
Mm.
just in the clips in the trailer, you see, people putting in their hotel rooms and stuff like that. And I imagine myself as a golf professional and playing golf 23 hours a day. That's what I would I'd have to play 40 hours a day to play at that level. But
Yeah.
so in terms of, their work, did it surprise you how much or maybe not how much?
No, it surprised me how much they play and how much they work.
Yeah.
It's like, that scene from the teaser that you saw is, Brooks Koepka putting to a wine bottle, and he's like, it's like midnight, and he'd been putting for 3 hours with his putting coach and Jenna and their dog just like sitting there, and Brooks Koepka is somebody who's not, known for being like obsessively work grinder,
Correct.
but he is, and he does, and that's all he thinks about, you know.
Huh.
He told us in his first interview that he wakes up at night 2 a.m, can't sleep, and is like making a club grip like in bed, just thinking about, golf and the swing, and they work so hard. I mean, so many examples of just like how intense how much they practice, how deliberate their practice is. I think that's, we don't get into that. Like, we don't, spend a lot of time like walking through a practice routine with a player. But like, I remember one time we showed up and somebody was putting, hitting like a 10-foot putt up the hill, going through their entire routine, marking the ball, lining it up, doing the practice putts and putting it. And then I went out, followed another player for like an hour and a half, and I came back and they were still hitting the same putt, still going through the same routine. I'd be bored out of my mind, like hitting that same putt, 1,000 times.
Right.
They were there doing. That's what it takes, And then the physical
if
side of it, I think, people maybe have a sense now, but like you really get a sense of just how much they like work out and how much they train and stretch, and like the physical side, being on the road and having to kind of swing as hard as they do, and like distance obviously become such a, a good sign of like winning. Like the faster your swing speed is, the lower scoring average is going to be a lot of times. It's not true for everybody, but that's generally like, everybody's hitting a lot further and moving their body in a lot different ways. And so, they spend, for every second they're not on the golf course, a lot of times they're like in an ice bath, or they're, getting stretched out, or they're going to the gym in the gym trailer. And that ended up being kind of this impromptu, like really funny, almost like pseudo locker room, like throughout the season. Cause you'd just be in the gym at the PGA Tour events, and there'd just be like, oh, there's Scotty Scheffler. Oh, there's Justin Thomas. Oh, Jordan Spieth just walked in. Oh, Rory's like making, talking shit. Like, it's just like this became this little like environment where they take it seriously. And then the caddies too, like the amount of work the caddies put in, that was pretty striking as well to watch, them like gunning out there and walking the course, and, even just seeing the way they prepare during a practice round, putting down, little, simulated cups and chipping and putting different areas. And it all happens kind of in this like flow. And the craziest part of it is like, it is like a traveling circus, like it's the same people and the same gear trucks and the same gym, and it all just kind of pops up in different cities. And it's a little bit like high school in that respect. Like everybody's kind of there together, not just the players, but like the caddies and the managers, and everybody just kind of knows each other. There's this interesting kind of bond that forms, which is I think partly why like the live stuff is so disruptive, because these guys, you may not be best friends with everybody out there on tour, but you're all like tour players. You're there together. Like you made it. You're the best in the world, and they're all type A, kind of credible athletes and workers, and their mental toughness is there. And it's like all of a sudden, guys start leaving the tour, and they're like, no, this is calling into question like everything that I've defined myself by. And I think that's why people had really strong opinions. And it really broke that spirit of like that high school feel in a really interesting way for the show, to be honest.
Right.
But
no, I can imagine. And as Polt says in the teaser there, it was quite a year to have your cameras rolling on the PGA Tour. Now, as you're watching them work out and grind and practice and go through their routines, anything that you picked up as a golfer, selfishly? I mean, God, if I'm following the best players around in the world around for a year or so, I'd like to think I might shave a couple shots off my handicap. Did you pick up anything?
I mean, I wish it worked that way. I did get a really great golf tip that did shave some strokes off not from a player, but actually from Sean Foley. This also was at the Masters. Like we were standing there watching somebody hit on the range, just talking to each other, and I've gotten to know like Sean pretty well. And I'm like, hey, can I ask you a golf question? And if you say that to Sean Foley, like you better be ready for like an hour long dissertation, after that.
Right.
And so, funny, one of the other agents was there and he heard me ask him and he was like, oh boy, here it comes, so just like, here's what I'm struggling with, whatever. And he was like, without even watching me swing, he's like, I think you've got a trigger problem. He's like, I try this next time you're out on the course, count backwards from 5. And when you get to 0, say the word swing in your mind and just pull the trigger. Like, doesn't matter if you're ready or not. You're 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, swing, and you're going. And he's like, it has to be backwards because your brain, it's wired where if you're counting upwards, like it doesn't work the same way. But when you're counting backwards, it's just hard enough and engages that like part of your brain that kind of takes away your muscle control. So now you're just swinging your natural swing. And I'll be damned, he was right. Like, I started doing it and now I do it every time. And I think my handicap's a little lower than it was in the beginning of the season. And it was 100% Sean Foley.
Countdown. Oh man. All right. We're going to have the Broken Tee
Give
Society.
it a try.
Folks out there undertaking the index experiment this year, trying to play their best golf with the Golfer's Journal, might count down from 5. That's interesting. Well, I can see that actually, though. I mean, if I was on a shot I was nervous about or on a first tee or something, like that might be just a cool way to clear your head and actually get the club to move backwards when you find yourself in those moments.
Yeah, apparently it really does like rewire your brain very shortly by counting backwards. And that takes your mind off of the technical side of it because you're using that brain power to like remember how to count down instead of count up.
Yeah.
And it worked. I mean, it honestly worked. It was wild that it worked, but it worked. So it was the best lesson I ever got, and I never even had a club in my hand.
Now, was there a player in terms of, you as a fan, what fans think of, have expectations and ideas about what Rory's like, what Justin Thomas is like, or what Scottie Scheffler, like, you have those preconceptions or those images or those ideas that are built through telecasts and through brief media interviews. Who surprised you the most where maybe you said, you know what, this guy, is nothing like people think he is?
Brooks Koepka, hands down. Completely
when
different.
You said he was grinding for 4 hours, I was like, why doesn't he tell that to people? He would have more fans because there is this impression that he'd rather be playing baseball or something, right?
Oh yeah. And he'll say that, but then you get inside of his world a little bit and, he longs for golf. Like he is, Brooks was the most surprising player in the show by far in terms of, his outward perception, at least the impression that I had, and the person that we got to know and got to film with. And I think his episode and his portrayal in the show will blow people away at sort of what is going on in his head. So Brooks, hands down, the most different from anybody that I, sort of my understanding of golf and general fandom. Matt Fitzpatrick, another player that, kind of is flying under the radar for us and just turned out to be unbelievably interesting. And, his approach to the statistical side of the game, how incremental his improvement has been, but just like relentlessly incrementally improving to kind of culminate in him winning the US Open and having it his first PGA Tour win at the same time. I mean, that was really cool. And like, I'm the biggest Matt Fitzpatrick fan now, just getting to know him. And he's just an amazing guy, like very gracious, funny, dark sense, not dark sense of humor, but like sneakily witty and really has a great dry wit. He's been really fun. Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth, like, about their friendship. Everybody kind of understands that, but getting to know both of those guys pretty well, like, just, I'm, fans for life. Jordan Spieth's got a hilarious sense of humor that I think, like, you may not know about just kind of watching him being a fan.
Really? Yeah.
But yeah, they're like, those guys really, really surprised me.
So these lots of perks and side benefits now for you now, Chad, now that you're buddies with half the tour, their agents, etc. You're not going to want for a round of golf. The golf world will be open to you, I would imagine. Have you been able to take advantage of any, as a player yourself, teeing it up in any cool spots or playing with any guys you're like, wow, this is pretty neat?
Well, what's funny about it is I've still never played with a pro golfer, like, ever. Just, maybe that'll change after the show comes out, but I didn't want to ask. It's a relationship. Like, I'm there to tell their story.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
It's like I didn't want to ask. I'm actually playing in the Pro-Am at Waste Management Phoenix Open for the first time I've ever played a pro. So that'll actually be my first official round with pro golf. But that's actually not true. I played a round of golf when I was like 14 with Franklin Langham. That's a real deep cut sort of early aughts golfer, but he led the PGA Tour in sand saves. So yeah, I did play golf with Franklin Langham once, and I remember like I bladed one like right off the first tee. But yeah, Franklin, thank you for that if you're listening.
How did you not get him on the show?
You know what?
I
I should have. You know,
the relationship was right there.
Yeah, it was right there. Exactly. We'll see. I mean, I've got, I've very lucky to get to play a lot of golf, and I didn't play with players, but sometimes we'd be out there at some of these events, and I'd get invited and go sneak out. I still think that round of golf I played at Shadow Creek in 2019 at CES was by far the most impactful round of golf I've ever played, because this is what led to this show. I mean, directly. It also, by the way, in my gin was the highest score I've had since I've been keeping score in gin. Just to show you, my mind was probably not in it. At Shadow Creek, I think I shot 94.
I was going to say, yeah, right. Well, people are going to ask now, what is your handicap?
I think right now it's like a 0.4. So
0.4,
0.4, yeah. I got it down to a plus 0.4 or plus 0.5 over the summer when it was a little less rainy out here in LA. I was playing a little bit more, but yeah, I've been hovering around scratch. But yeah, that's the only score in the 90s is at Shadow Creek on the day that this show was hatched. Just a solid 94 with a set of rental clubs, But
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, as you said, you were out for other things that day, but it's only appropriate that the show sort of hatched over a round of golf.
Yeah, I mean, you can't write it.
Some on-course networking, right?
Exactly.
Season 2, is there going to be more?
Well, we'll be out there, so stay tuned. But you'll see our cameras out there starting in a couple weeks.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll look for them. Chad, can't thank you enough for the time. This was so much fun. I'm really excited for the show. I'm not going to lie to you. Is it all coming out are all the episodes coming out together, or is it like one per week kind of deal?
We're not dripping it out. You're going to be able to binge it. So, all 8 episodes coming out February 15th, full swing on Netflix. Yeah. Yeah. We're ready. I hope you're ready, because I'm pumped, and I really enjoyed this, Tom. Thank you so much for having me on. I love what you guys are doing. Happy to be, a member of the Broken Tea Society. And, this means a lot to be on here and hang out with you guys for a little bit.
You're the man. That's so cool. And we hope to see you at a Golfers Journal event soon. All right.
I'd love to.
Let's take that 0.4 handicap and let's bring it out. Maybe some Broken Tea 2-man, a little something. Try and get, you need to get some paint, some hardware.
Oh, yeah.
With the Golfers Journal. All right.
Love it. Awesome.
Maybe season 4 or 5, following Foster around in his van, going from event to event. Once the PGA's had enough of you, we'll have you at the Golfers Journal. Awesome, Chad. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, you guys.